Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome. We really appreciate you all taking the time to join us this evening. We are holding this meeting tonight to go over the future land use section update before we start some of the more intensive outreach over the summer. We wanted to go over what was being proposed and some of the details so that folks have the latest information about the process and the future land use update. Before we dive into the presentation, I'll ask the team to introduce themselves. I'm Melissa Dickens, Division Director of Strategic Planning, Environmental, and Research with the Planning Commission, and I am a co-project lead on this project with Jennifer Malone. Jennifer?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Malone. I'm the City of Tampa liaison here at the Planning Commission. I'll turn it over to Evan Johnson.
Evan Johnson, Interim Director, City Planning. And Lauren?
Hi, I'm Lauren O'Neill. I'm the Senior Planning Coordinator on the City Planning team.
Great, thanks. And we also have some folks from the Planning Commission team who are here to help us with some of the logistics. If we could go to the next slide, please. So again, thanks for joining us. Here is a brief overview of what you can expect this evening. Today's presentation, we really want to cover some of the nuts and bolts, the who, the what, the why, the how of the comp plan update, the future land use update, and the process. We're going to go over briefly what each document is, what it does, what's being proposed, and some resources. A lot of this is probably going to be familiar for folks who have been with us throughout this process. We do have many folks who are joining us this evening for the first time. And so because of this, we want to take the time to go through everything we've been working on, share what we've done so far, and what to expect in the coming months. Besides touching on Tampa's comp plan and how we use the future land use in our long-term planning, I'll also be going over what we've heard in the first round of outreach, then turn it over to Jennifer for the changes and updates that are being proposed, as well as some resources. After the presentation, we will take questions using the Q&A format. You should see a button up at the top of your screen. You should be able to click that. If you think of a question during the presentation, you can submit that and it will go to staff. Then following the presentation, we will go through the questions in order in which they are received, and staff will read the question as well as read aloud an answer. So with that, could we go ahead and go to the next slide? Okay, so tonight really builds on the engagement that first started in 2022. We've had over 30 meetings thus far. We have heard that some folks who weren't able to participate in the process during the first time. So we're here tonight to share what's proposed, and specifically the Tampa City Council direction given to us on May 22nd to allow additional opportunities for the community to engage over the summer. The Tampa City Council also asked us to look at a couple of specific topics in more depth at those at more specific district meetings. So we'll be doing a deep dive into those topics at those meetings, but we wanted to get everyone up to speed on what's proposed, what we've been doing, and where we are. And we'd also appreciate it if you didn't have folks or if you have folks in your network who weren't able to make it tonight. We're going to have another meeting. It will be the same content tomorrow at noon. These meetings are also going to be recorded, so we can share that link as well after we finish up. So next slide, please. So first we'll cover the who. You met some of us virtually this evening. There are a number of entities and organizations and stakeholders involved in the process. Really, we want to underscore the last bullet. We really appreciate all of you all taking the time here, and look forward to hearing your questions and your feedback on this project. Okay, so a little bit about our board, the Hillsborough County City-County Planning Commission. We are an independent consolidated planning agency that does the long-range planning for all 4 local governments in Hillsborough County. Our board is a recommending body made up of appointed citizens, some from each jurisdiction, and we coordinate growth, transportation, the environment, and long-range planning. And a little bit more about the composition of the Planning Commission. There are 10 voting members from the city of Tampa, appointed by Tampa City Council, as well as 4 from the county, 1 from Plant City, 1 from Temple Terrace, and then we have 2 ex officio members as well. Okay, so we'll dive into the comprehensive plan, which is the broader document in which the future land use section sits. This is a document that all local governments in Florida are required to have and to update on a regular basis. The comprehensive plan guides a number of different topics that affect growth and development in the city, everything from housing to mobility, infrastructure, and the environment. It is adopted by Tampa City Council, and all rezonings and developments have to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. And this is a link for folks who may not have spent much time with the comprehensive plan before. We do have an adopted comprehensive plan that is in effect today. That's our Imagine 2040 plan, and you can find that at the link below. It's planhillsborough.org, and then City of Tampa 2040 comprehensive plan. Okay, so now we'll talk a little bit about the future land use, or you might hear it referred to as the FLU. This is a long-term vision that designates the land uses for the city. So where are the residential, where is the retail, what should be industrial, what should be preserved for open space. There are broad policies that work to ensure compatibility, guide growth, and enable resource protection. We did hear a lot of comments and feedback about zoning earlier in this process, and just want to specify that the comprehensive plan is different than zoning. We have a slide that'll talk through some of those differences, but really the comprehensive plan is a much more visionary, broader planning framework, and then the zoning happens when is more a current development process. Next slide. This is the adopted future land use map. This is in effect today. So there are a number, I know they're a little blurry on here, but there are a number of different categories, residential categories, mixed use categories, community categories that guide the future growth and development of the city. So some folks might be interested to learn that they're in Res 20 or that they're in a mixed use category. This is also available on our website, and we'll be sharing more about this in the resources page. We are not proposing any updates to this specific map, with the exception of a couple of category additions like commercial restricted, but wanted to make folks aware that this is something that you can take a look at and see where your property is and what the future land use category is. Next slide. Okay, just a little bit more detail about how the future land use differs from zoning. It's really a broader planning framework guiding future land use decisions. The comprehensive plan is kind of the overarching 35,000-foot umbrella document, and the land development code is more of a regulatory document where there are development standards and procedures. So for example, if you're curious about setbacks, that would be in the land development code. Building height, massing, and scale is all typically in the land development code as well. In the future land use plan, you'd be looking at what is the maximum zoning category I could get for my property, or what is planned for the future of my community, whether it's commercial, residential, industrial, etc. The future land use categories also establish the specific maximum density and intensity. And so we'll be talking a little bit about that as we get into some of the bonus structures and provisions as well. Next slide. I just want to again note and appreciate our partnership to update this comprehensive plan. This is being done in close collaboration with the City of Tampa. We appreciate their partnership throughout this process. We began this process a couple of years ago, starting with a vision. Jen, if you could go to the next slide. We asked people throughout the community what they wanted to see. We received about 1,000 responses, and we read all of the comments, whittled that down, and created a vision statement as well as 9 vision themes. So a lot of what we're doing as part of this future land use update is striving to build on what we heard from the community as part of the initial visioning effort. Next slide. So now we'll get into the future land use update. The approach started with really a wholesale review and revision of the future land use section. We wanted to streamline and consolidate the language. Our current adopted plan has 20 different goals for just the future land use section. We brought that down to 7. We've been working closely with city staff and stakeholders and conducting outreach in multiple phases, starting with the vision in 2022. Next slide. We've held a number of different visioning sessions, town halls, stakeholder meetings, polls, and we also have some tools, again, that we'll go over towards the end, but we have a project website and then an interactive web map for exploring some of the changes. Next slide, please. And just a quick note about the folks that we've been coordinating with throughout this process. They've represented neighborhoods, developers, excuse my dog in the background, and a number, he was not a participant, and a number of different stakeholders throughout the community. Next slide. And so a little bit about what we've heard through the first round of engagement. Again, we recognize that people are joining us tonight or perhaps getting involved in this process for the first time, but we did want to share what we heard when we were out in the community from 2022 to 2024. So we've heard that the top issues facing Tampa residents are housing choices, transportation, and housing affordability. We were also asked to further address environmental concerns, specifically coastal resiliency. There was a support for flexibility for development, but a need for clarity and certainty. Some of the existing policies were categorized as a little bit vague. We need to have nuance in a city as large as Tampa. And then the proposed bonuses, we were asked to develop some clear criteria for implementation. And some of the tools that we'll be talking about a little bit later, the bonuses, the changes to the R10, some of those were developed in response to what we heard and a way to implement these as part of the update. Next slide. Okay, and also just want to share a little bit about what we heard in the first round of outreach and how it's shaped the future land use update. We released a draft in August 2024 and got a number of a number of components that folks had feedback on that we have worked to incorporate into the latest draft. So just wanted to share what we heard on the first round and how we've incorporated it. Next slide. Okay, I think this is where I turn it over to Jennifer to go through the nuts and bolts of the future land use update. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. Jennifer Malone here. So we have been looking at how we can simplify the comprehensive plan goals. Right now, we have over 20 comprehensive plan goals for the future land use section, and there's a lot of redundancy there. So there's a proposal for about 7 goals, which I'll get to in a later slide. The future land use section is also proposing a place types structure, a bonus structure, some category revisions. It's also proposing some policies that we would hope promotes neighborhood mixed use, which is a really big thing that we heard about in our initial outreach. Housing needs. This is where we're going to get into the nitty gritty of the townhomes and the residential 10, which I would imagine a lot of folks on this call have heard about. So we're going to be discussing that in later slides. The coastal high hazard area, policy revisions, strengthening economic assets, That means preserving our industrial lands, policies related to MacDill and the port as well. And then finally, our preservation policies related to historic. So as I touched on earlier, these are our 7 goals proposed for the future land use section, very much streamlined, and each goal really relates back to a vision theme. I won't read all of the goals, but they are on the slide. As you can see, we start with citizen participation in the planning process as goal number 1 because it's that important, and that's why we're here tonight. The place types and bonus structure is really the foundation, another foundation of the Tampa future land use section. We've looked at the city and determined how should this be divided. There's a proposal to split the city up into regional activity centers, transit ready corridors, and context sensitive neighborhoods. And I'll get into what each of those means in the next slide. There's a bonus structure proposed. That means that we want to incentivize higher density and intensity development within the regional activity centers, and then a mid-tier bonus within the transit-ready corridors. A lot of those transit-ready corridors are your arterial roadways, such as Dale Mabry Highway, Hillsborough Avenue, Florida Avenue, and we know that there are neighborhoods that are within proximity very close to those arterials. And so we want to make sure that that bonus is calibrated correctly, since we know that there's neighborhoods in close proximity to any development that would occur on those corridors. Finally, another big proposal are two new bonuses, including an affordable housing bonus and a green development bonus. As Melissa Dickens stated earlier, resiliency and the environmental aspect was something we heard a lot about in the initial outreach, and that's where that green development bonus came from. So here are the place types. I touched on these earlier, but regional activity centers, that's going to be downtown, the central business district, as well as the central business district periphery, which is already established, but it's essentially a circle around downtown, capturing those neighborhoods that are close to downtown, so they should have a little bit extra based on that location. It's actually been in the plan for a very long time already, the central business district periphery. Another regional activity center is West Shore. That is a very large office and shopping community, and we think it's really important to recognize that as a regional activity center. It also has a very high future land use category already in place. The last one would be Fowler, the Fowler Vision area. The Planning Commission worked closely with the county as well as the city of Tampa to put together a visioning plan and a lot of outreach done in Fowler. And so designating that area as a regional activity center, providing its own policies and bonus is really going to help implement that plan. And we know that there's a lot of potential in Fowler for more redevelopment and development. And lastly, the transit supportive development areas is another regional activity center. Those are areas that have fixed guideway rail today, such as the area around the streetcar, or we would hope that that would be present in the future. And so there's certain language in the plan that anticipates the future development of transit and a bonus because we want to link housing and transit. The transit-ready corridors is our mid-tier place type. As I stated earlier, those are typically your arterial roadways, Hillsborough Avenue, Florida Avenue, Dale Mabry. That's where we would see mid-tier development, but still encouraging housing along those corridors. But we do know that we need to remain sensitive to the neighborhoods that are within proximity to these. Finally, context-sensitive neighborhoods. These are areas that we understand are grappling with the effects of infill development within proximity and are usually surrounded by infill development. A good example of this are any of the historic districts that they have their own character, and we thought it was very important for the plan to recognize them. Today, you might hear those referred to as urban villages. We have revamped those policies. They're now going to be referred to as context-sensitive neighborhoods, and we have broadened the criteria and broadened the areas that qualify as a context-sensitive neighborhood with some policy direction that would really implement better form and design in these areas. This is a map of the proposed place types. I know it's hard to see on the screen, but we do have an interactive map we'll show later at the resources slide, but you can see the green are our regional activity centers. You can see all the corridors highlighted as our transit ready corridors, and then that purple are our context sensitive neighborhoods. Through this update, there's a proposed bonus structure. Something we heard about a lot throughout this process was that the city should be receiving a public benefit in exchange for increased density and intensity. And so that is what the plan is seeking to do through this update, is to increase the role of affordable housing in qualifying for the bonuses. There's more future land use categories included in the bonus structure than there are today, and it would reduce the need for plan amendments. And so that would ultimately lead to an easier process for folks. This is an example. It's a lot to look at on the screen right now, I know, but this is an example of the proposed bonus structure. And I've been saying in these meetings, this is really like a choose your own adventure for development, because it means that you can mix and match these. So there can be all affordable housing, or maybe the project is located near the transit ready corridor and they also do the efficient and resilient bonus to get that bump. Or maybe it's efficient and resilient, transit ready, and affordable housing. The main takeaway here is that ceilings have been set in the table, and the proposals may not exceed those ceilings of the category. This slide is explaining the category revisions. This is very nitty gritty, but I think it's important to touch on because it causes a lot of confusion. Today, the community mixed use 35 future land use category does not mean 35 dwelling units an acre. And so in an effort to make things easier to understand and streamline, there's a proposal to drop the density from the title of the category at the end. We would retain the 30 dwelling units an acre in the coastal high hazard area, and I'll get to the coastal high hazard area later and its importance. Outside of that, the density would be 35 by right, and then there would be a bonus option outside of the coastal high hazard area or within coastal development areas up to 70 dwelling units an acre. And we really think that this is a refresh of how those categories function now. Promoting neighborhood mixed use. There's a future land use category today called neighborhood mixed use 35, 16, and 24 that's very limited in its application. Through the update, we're hoping that category could be applied more broadly and applied citywide. We've also expanded the existing commercial locational criteria to allow neighborhood serving commercial uses in more places. So in the residential 10 future land use category, we would be able to consider through this proposal neighborhood serving commercial if a site has frontage on 2 collector and or 2 arterial roadways. So if it's at the corner of Himes and Dale Mabry, but it has residential 10, that would be an example of where that could be considered. We've heard a lot about housing, especially early in this process. Respondents really wanted more missing middle housing in the city. Townhomes and duplexes were some of the most needed housing types in Tampa that we heard. The listening sessions revealed a broad support for a range of housing types along corridors and within neighborhoods. And to respond to those, the proposal was to clarify existing language around single-family attached housing, which basically means townhomes and duplexes, in the residential 10 designation, as well as establishing criteria for where that can take place. And so I'll explain a little bit more on the slide. Today, this is the language in the comprehensive plan. It allows the consideration of single-family attached homes in limited areas within this designation, but it doesn't say exactly where. It just generally encourages them on the periphery of single-family detached neighborhoods, and the periphery is not defined. So staff has had to make case-by-case judgment calls when these come in, either when counseling applicants or when writing a finding, if it does proceed through the zoning process that somebody would ask for a townhome in a residential 10 category. That is not providing probably the best direction for the city. And we felt that hearing the feedback from folks that people wanted a little bit more certainty in the development process, we could use some criteria here for a better understanding of where these uses can occur. So the proposed criteria is that that it could be considered, and now I say that for a reason, considered. It would have to still be approved through a rezoning, but if the parcel in the residential 10 category fronts a collector or a higher classified roadway, is adjacent to a parcel with a higher density flu category, or is located within the boundary of a transit ready corridor. So that neighborhood that's maybe 1 block away from Florida Avenue, or a parcel that's right on Hillsborough and has a residential 10 future land use could be considered for this different housing type in this category. There's additional requirements that are being proposed that we don't have today. So today, there's no requirement on massing and scale. The floor area ratio limitation of a 0.8 basically just means that we want it to be compatible with the single family detached that it's probably surrounded by. And again, that design must reflect the massing and the scale, massing, and style of the nearby structures if it meets this criteria. And it would ultimately be approved by Tampa City Council on a case-by-case basis through the rezoning process. But this provides some guidance in staff and to neighbors about where they can expect this type of housing type. And this is just an example of some missing middle housing that we did hear folks really want to encourage throughout the community. Finally, the coastal high hazard areas. This is established by the state, and it's the area that's particularly vulnerable to the effects of coastal flooding from storm events. The state statute defines this as the area below the elevation of Category 1 storm surge, as established by the SLOSH computerized storm surge model. A simplified way of saying this is generally, but not always, but generally evacuation zone A. So we need to take a closer look at how these areas are being developed, how we're reviewing these areas when folks want to put more density in the coastal high hazard area. What guidance should the plan have? Because today, the guidance under the adopted column is just that we don't want to have a net increase in residential density within the CHHA. Based on some feedback that was vague and could probably be strengthened a little bit, staff proposed to the Planning Commission on April 7th, the language in the middle column that plan amendments should be prohibited and in the CHHA. The Planning Commission then directed staff to change that policy. They continued the future land use section to May 12th. They asked staff to come back on May 12th with broader language. And so that is what's on the table right now, is that last column, the language that staff brought back to the Planning Commission. That's still pretty, it still says no plan amendment shall increase the maximum residential potential, but as you noticed, there are some nuances in how it was reframed. Here's a map of the coastal high hazard area that's in green. The coastal development areas is the red hatch. And so these are areas that we still expect some development to occur. And we think that it probably should, because of plans that are already adopted within these areas. These are our community redevelopment areas that have special financing and taxing that could put that towards resilient infrastructure, as well as West Shore, because West Shore also has a special taxing district and it's a regional activity center. Finally, this area in the furthest southern part of the city, right north of McDill, that's highlighted in that we have an inset. There's some remnant industrial parcels on single family detached lots here. They're in the coastal high hazard area, but we do see those, and we think that there's a big opportunity for those to have an opportunity to convert to residential 10 future land use category, which would mean single family detached. The policy has limited any plan amendments in this area to only be to residential 10. Next, there's there's strengthening of existing policy direction about our economic assets. Through this plan update, we have proposed a new industrial preservation map to identify areas for protection. Today, the plan wants to protect all industrial, and we wanted to take a deeper dive and kind of look at which areas should be industrial and which areas would naturally convert to different uses. And here's just some pictures of our industrial areas that we took into consideration. Anything in the Port Activity Center would need to be what is on that industrial preservation map. What did not make it on the industrial preservation map is the Tampa Industrial Park on Fowler, because again, that is a regional activity center, and we do through the visioning plan that was done, that area will probably transition to a broader mix of uses later. And here's the industrial preservation map. This will be used in staff reviews when a plan amendment comes in to change something out of the industrial category. Finally, enhancing historic preservation. That's still a very important part of the comprehensive plan and a very important component of the work that we do. So the plan just refines the existing language for clarity on those policies. We're removing redundancies, and we really want to promote those policies to promote the compatible development around historic district edges. These are some resources where everybody can find out more about the work that we're doing. livegrowthrive2045.com is a great resource. On livegrowthrive2045.com, there's a link to our future land use assessment and then our interactive map, where all of these policy proposals have been put into interactive format so folks can see what we're looking at and where it's taking place in their neighborhood. We're going to be doing outreach all summer based on City Council direction. We have 2 meetings already scheduled in City Council districts. Wednesday, July 16th at the Barksdale Center and Monday, August 4th at Jan Platt Library. And pretty soon we'll be announcing the remaining 2 district meetings. We'll also have some more virtual meetings in August as well, some virtual wrap-up meetings. And we'll be back to City Council on August 28th. We really appreciate your participation. Any comments can be submitted to planner@plancom.org. And now I think it's time for Q&A. So if you have questions in the Q&A box, I'll turn it over to Meg McCarthy to help us moderate those.
Again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm going to be reading through the questions from the Q&A that have been submitted this far. Anyone who hasn't submitted a question yet, the button at the top, the Q&A on the top of your screen, if you would like to go ahead and do that now, I will read those aloud. We'd like that to be used as a Q&A box so we have time to get through all the questions and be respectful of the time before the meeting ends. So with that being said, I'll let our first round of questions go through. So first we have a question regarding why not allow duplexes and townhomes on collectors. Why only allow duplexes and townhomes on collectors and arterials? And I believe there's a follow-up to that question, which is, let's prove that. Why must we have so many transit-ready corridors? Let's just do transit-ready between areas in the green, the regional areas.
Thanks, Meg. I can answer this. We have so many transit-ready corridors because we worked with Hart on what their future plans are for more bus routes in the city. And so we looked at areas that already have service or we expect to have service in the future. We are also looking, your point is well taken about allowing duplexes and townhomes on collectors and arterials. I'm assuming you mean only collectors and arterials and not within the transit ready corridor buffer. And so I do really appreciate that comment and feedback. And that's what we're here today to hear those ideas and how we can make this better.
Great, thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I just saw green equals regional. I understand. Okay. Just do the transit ready corridor between the green. Okay, we will definitely take a look at that. I also see the comment about preserving industrial. I understand the live local concern, but we I think the planners, there is still a planning argument for preserving industrial in the city and keeping that to be retained and providing some guidance on where it should be preserved. And even though we have ever since the Live Local Act has been implemented, we still do have plan amendments that seek to change industrial to something else. So we still do need that guidance on the industrial preservation map. But thank you. That is a good point.
All right, we'll move on to our next question. So I'll read out, it's got a comment first. The proposed land use policy 7.1.4 states, explore the feasibility of allowing future density bonuses on plan amendment increases in the coastal high hazard area when the developer agrees to construct or invest in infrastructure improvements that the city deems will enhance the resiliency of the surrounding area. Please define who the city is and the context. Is this the city council or the zoning administrator or the planning department? This is a vague and ambiguous designation as to who would make this decision, and the word deems is a subjective and nebulous criteria term. Density bonuses or plan amendment increases should not be considered at all in the coastal high hazard area.
Yeah, I just want to thank this person for their comment. We had some direction from our planning commission to include this provision for exploring at a future date. You're absolutely right that the language is broad. It is broad because we aren't even sure if that's something that the city will ultimately want to implement. That's why it's explore the feasibility of. They asked us to at least have the city explore this. I think the details about how that would work are something that we would be pursuing at a future date if it is determined to be feasible and desirable by the city. And I see Evan unmuted himself, and I wanted to see if he had anything to add from the city perspective.
Yeah, I would just add that as it is a policy, it is a policy directing the city to explore the idea. And as far as whether that be council directed or whether that be administration directed at some future date, staff would, once directed, we would go explore and come up with recommendations, per the request. But it's not something ultimately that is requiring the city to move forward, and it would be up to council or up to administration to ask us to move forward with something. As far as who the city is, ultimately, in order to create a bonus, it would have to be adopted through the Land Development Code, and that would be a Land Development Code amendment, which has to go through council and all of that. As it works now, and I would expect it to work in most cases in the future, any bonus would have to have a bonus provision agreement, which has to get approved by City Council. So that's the way it works now, and I would expect it to work similarly in the future, in many cases, if not most. But ultimately, we would be awaiting instruction from council or administration as far as exploring that further.
All right, if that wraps up the answer to that question, we'll move on to our next question, which is, what are the types of bonuses that we referred to?
I can start, and Jen, maybe, I don't know if we have that slide again that shows the different options, just so we can refresh folks, but there are a few different bonuses that are proposed as part of this update. The details about the percentage and what would be required and how everything works on a more detailed level is in the draft. Oh, there we go. In the draft future land use section update. So as part of the follow-up to this meeting, we'll make sure to include that link to attendees, and so that you all can go and look at it. But the bonuses that were being considered, or excuse me, that are being considered are bonus for affordable housing, one for proximity to transit, and certain developments over a certain size threshold would be required to have an affordable housing component, and then a green development bonus. And then there are some bonuses that exist today in the plan, like the Seminole Heights node bonus. Those are proposed to be continued. But really, as Jen mentioned, the intent is to make sure that there is a public benefit as part of an increase in density or intensity. We heard a lot about that during the first phase of the outreach. So having these different bonuses, being able to combine them, mix and match, is our approach to trying to have new options for having more housing, but also making sure that there is a public benefit.
Awesome. So our next question is how would developers be held accountable to pay for long-term upkeep 10, 20, 40 plus years of any developer infrastructure improvements in the coastal high hazard area? As this is not addressed in the land use policy 7.1.4, taxpayers should not be subsidizing future density bonuses or plan amendment increases in the coastal high hazard area.
So I can talk generally. So one of the things, just because the language is general, those nuances and how things are maintained is something that I believe, and Evan, please correct me if I'm wrong, but those are handled through the bonus provision agreements. So that's where any kind of maintenance or requirement would be handled. But I also do want to note and recognize your comment about taxpayers not subsidizing bonuses or plan amendment increases in the coastal high hazard area as well.
Yeah, I would just add that ultimately, again, um, the detail would be put into the land development code if we were to pursue that particular bonus specifically. The bonus provision agreement would be the legal mechanism as far as maintenance goes. And if it is something that the developer put on their own structure or on their own property, to make the building more resilient, to make the development more resilient, that would be a developer responsibility. If it was some other improvement in the public realm, that would have to be laid out in that bonus provision agreement. Or ultimately, if it is a roadway improvement, a seawall improvement, or something like that, that could potentially increase resiliency, um, if it was in the city's interest, it could be turned over to the city. But that would be because it is protecting a greater area than just that one development. We have seawall all around the city that is in need of repair and restoration. So there are many ways it could go, but ultimately it would have to be defined in the code, and that maintenance would have to be figured out as part of that process.
All right. Our next question comes from a new attendee and asks, how does this committee tie in with regional transportation planning, such as mapping out development near any future Brightline rail terminals?
I can address that one. The planning commission is housed in the same floor as the transportation planning organization, and we have a joint agreement, and so our staffs work very closely together. So the bonus I referred to early on, the transit supportive development areas bonus, includes trigger language that when we do have rail in the city, passenger rail, that bonus can be unlocked essentially. And there's some criteria laid out. And we worked on that language to make sure that it would apply if Brightline or if we had other passenger rail in the city, that we would be able to utilize it there. And so there's certain criteria, and I'm happy if you want to send me an email to talk about this more, but we did take that into consideration, and that's a great benefit of working so closely with our partners in the transportation planning organization and throughout the process as well about the corridors with HART.
I think that we have a few comments that I just want to make sure now get read into, just a few comments about our previous topic of conversations. Only where HART has them now, you can add more when HART adds them. I believe we're talking about transit ready corridors. Then 7.1.4 has to go. And then we move on to an additional question here. At what point do we stop proposing major zoning changes to increase density in South Tampa, given the significant increase in traffic over the past decade, along with thousands of new apartments, particularly south of Gandy off of West Shore? South Tampa already has a density over 2 times that of other areas, and the quality of life has been impacted unfavorably. Secondary to that, maybe I'll let you guys answer that question and we'll get to the second question after that.
Sure, Jennifer, I'll take a stab at this question. This update is not proposing major zoning changes. This is a update to the future land use section of the comprehensive plan. It's a long range planning document that's going to guide the development in the city for the next 20 or so years. Any zoning changes that have increased density in South Tampa are ultimately approved by Tampa City Council, but that is not what we have proposed through this update. And I definitely understand the second line of the comment, and that is what we've been hearing this throughout the process, and I just want to make sure that everybody knows that comment is heard. I'll let you read the second question, Meg, unless Melissa
Yeah.
Dickens wants to chime in at all.
No, I just was going to say, sometimes there is something that is already adopted on the future land use map today. That is how we review zoning specifically for consistency with the comprehensive plan. So, any zoning change would have been under what is adopted today. And like Jennifer said, our staff makes a recommendation, but ultimately all rezoning changes do go before Tampa City Council.
All right, the second part of that question is, why don't we start to charge large impact fees to build infrastructure in advance of more housing in order to stop overwhelming our neighborhoods?
I will address this one only in that I will say that the city is currently looking at some of its impact fees, including mobility fees, to look at how to address new development and use and try to offset the impacts of new development. That is typically how impact fees work. In the city, we've got our mobility fee as our primary impact fee. So that is something that we we are looking at. There is a study underway looking at the amounts we're charging, looking at the amounts, what is more appropriate, what are we going to be able to fund with that money as it comes in, so that we do charge them now, but we are looking at a major overhaul as it relates to that to try to address some of that impact.
I wanted to just add to that for impact fees, the studying process of when we are thinking about raising them is pretty complex, and it has to be like a very highly studied process, because we can only charge exactly what the cost would be. We can't charge over what the cost would be in order to discourage development. So that is just something to keep in mind as the community thinks and talks about these tools of how we can improve the development that's coming in. We can't use impact fees specifically to discourage development. We can only charge what the shared burden on the system is going to be for that development.
I do think we had a hand raise from a council member. If this council member would still like to talk, I can certainly unmute. But the hand raise is no more. Okay, here it is. Okay, you should be able to unmute yourself, Councilmember Hurtak.
Yes. Hi, it's Councilwoman Hurtak, and I'm listening in on this. And I just wanted to say actually what she just so eloquently said, that the state basically requires us to go through a lot before we're allowed to change impact fees. But believe me, I am working very hard to change a lot of fees, but we do have to do a lot of studies. She eloquently said that. That's why I put my hand back down, but I do appreciate it.
All right. We just have another comment. We're referring to 7.1.4. The Tampa City Council ignored this request last fall, and that speaks volumes with that. So our next question, can you talk a little bit about why it's important to reduce spot plan amendments?
Sure, I can chime in on that, and let me I'll try and go back to the future land use map. So when this map is changed, as soon as I can show everybody the map, I will just stop sharing and reshare. When the color on the map is changed, it's almost impossible to reduce that density. to change the color on the map to something lesser than what it was approved for. So and that is a long-term change. As I've said before, it's something that we're looking out. This is a long-range planning document. It's a long-range map, and it's going to affect the development for a very long time in that area. Also, the city receives no public benefit for an increase in density through a plan amendment map change. And what we're hearing, what we've heard a little bit about today actually, is that there needs to be some public benefit for increased density. And the solution was and what other communities are doing is a revised bonus structure to help incentivize that, to make it more enticing for folks to go through the bonus structure instead of changing the color on the map, since that is almost permanent. If it's something approved through a rezoning with an approved bonus, then that's not as permanent as changing the future land use map. And I think it's really important to think long and hard before something is changed on the future land use map. We put a lot of thought into our staff analysis and if it's a good idea for that area and meets the policies of the plan. And I'll let Evan finish answering that question.
No, I was just going to add that, and the other advantage of a bonus, again, by not painting the map, if you will, by not changing color and increasing density as part of this process, necessarily with changing the land use categories on the map itself, we're using the bonuses to incentivize where we want the growth to happen. As you all know, living here, we can't legally, nor would we want to stop growth in the city. The city's growing, and our job is to manage it the best that we can and manage that change. And so we're hoping that through this mechanism, these new bonuses, we'll be able to not only incent the type of growth we want in the locations that we want, but that we will get that public benefit, as Jennifer mentioned. And one more thing I wanted to add to that is also these projects, as the process works now and currently, is that these projects would also be going to city council. And so we're going to be having conversations about these particular projects are going to be utilizing those bonuses, are going to be undergoing further scrutiny because we are allowing the potential for that additional density intensity. So it's development specific. It's not going to be given away with a parcel. It is going to be attached to a specific plan for a specific development. So there are more hurdles. There is more development potential, but it is a process that is going to be fairly controlled as well as we go through it.
Yeah, and I just want to add, the future land use map is changed 4 times a year. So folks can only apply in February, May, August, and November. And so it's also only $1,000 to apply right now. The fees have never been increased in the city of Tampa. And so it's just it's important to recognize that we wouldn't want that impact on the community.
All right, thank you guys. Our next question is, can you describe exactly how the new bonus structure allows us to receive more community benefits compared to the existing bonus methodology? Please use case examples if possible.
Sure, I can take a stab at this one. The new bonus structure, and Evan, please chime in, has a I think currently the bonus structure has a low, for one example, is an affordable house. There's an affordable housing bonus, and I believe it's 10% affordable housing to receive a bonus. The proposed structure would incorporate a sliding scale. So the amount of bonus achieved, the amount of units would need to go up, and that implementation would be in the land development code. There's also, and Evan, I want to give you an opportunity to try and chime in on this question.
I would say that first of all, I would just say that as far as case examples, I do think that is just to preview our upcoming discussions in the community. I do think that's something that we need to kind of delve in and be able to show the differences. I wouldn't be able to do that tonight without having prepared that in advance. But I think that ultimately the bonuses to the sliding scale, one of the things that Jennifer mentioned was the city has completed a housing needs assessment, which has been a study that's been a deep dive in our affordable housing issues. And ultimately, that sliding scale is being calibrated to the greatest need within the community. So if you are a developer and you are looking to get the maximum allowable bonus under the affordable housing bonus, for example, you're going to have to be providing housing at a income level that is the greatest need, which for us is generally it's under 60% of area median income for a household. So those things will be fleshed out in that code writing process, but that's again the level of public benefit attached to the level of intensity or density being granted is also something that is going to be it's going to be very much considered as we move forward with that.
All right, our next question. Can you please speak to what impact studies were performed before proposing adding density to R10? Specifically, there is no room for roads like West Shore south of Kennedy to be widened. High schools like Plant High School are over capacity and was to be recently redistricted. Public outcry took it from the list. And lastly, the city's stormwater infrastructure cannot handle heavy rainfall, especially during high tide in certain areas of South Tampa. Yet this doesn't seem to be accounted for given R10 being proposed in these areas.
Yeah, I can take that one, and then if I'm missing something, if Jen could jump in. First, really want to recognize and appreciate your sentiments. We heard a lot from folks who were impacted by the storms last year and have concerns about growth. I do want to note that in this particular case with the R10, there is not a density increase being proposed. Today, Jennifer, I don't know if you want to go back to that townhome slide, but today in the R10, townhomes can be considered. Really, the language is pretty vague. It says we should generally look at the periphery of the neighborhoods, but it's not clear exactly where they should go or what sort of conditions should be looked at. So staff worked to identify where potentially townhomes or, thank you, Jen, or attached single family could be allowed. So this is what's allowed today. Townhomes are allowed today in the R10. And then if you want to go to the next slide. So we tried through this process to make sure that we were keeping townhomes over the heart of out of the heart of the neighborhood and really directing to the periphery. So that's where that criteria comes in about the frontage on the roadways, the adjacency to these parcels, and the location within a TRC boundary, which we recognize we've been getting some feedback on tonight. We've also added some additional requirements about design and FAR to try to make any townhomes that are proposed compatible with the surrounding development. But do just want to underscore that this is not an increase in density. It's not that a townhome is automatically going to just pop up. It would still have to go through the appropriate rezoning process, potentially, a PD site plan potentially, and there are other mechanisms that would have to happen or other processes that would have to happen before it would be allowed. I also want to just encourage everyone who's on the call to take a look at the studies, and I see a lot of hands raised as I'm talking. If you could put your questions and comments in the chat, that is the fastest way we want to make sure that we're getting through everything in order. So if you could do that. So I would encourage everyone to take a look at the project page. That is where we have some of the studies that were done by our outside consultant and recommendations and the considerations there, and we can include a link to those as well.
Yeah, and just one more point. There's no adding density in the residential 10 through this process. The future land use map I had up a couple slides ago had a lot of residential 10 already on the map. That is designated and adopted. The change is to allow a broader housing type in more specific areas. As Melissa Dickens pointed out, there's already that allowance today, and this change would just direct it to exactly where we think that where we've heard that it should go, those townhomes. But it is not necessarily an increase in density. It's an increase in a housing type in certain places.
All right, we'll move on to our next question. Is the rounding up policy still in the plan? I didn't see it presented, and if so, please speak to why this proposed policy is so important. Example, if the units after FAR come out to 0.9 of a unit, developers have had to round down, and the effect of making developers hold out for neighboring lots.
Yeah, I can address this one. So yes, the rounding up policy is still in the plan. It seems to have gotten lost from this PowerPoint, multiple iterations of our outreach PowerPoint, but that proposal is still there. It is important because if there is actually a good example is city council's agenda from June at the zoning night. There were a couple bonuses for somebody to get one additional unit on their lot because because of the size of the lot and the density. And so the rounding up policy would allow if somebody has just needs just one additional unit, if the math comes out that you multiply the size of the lot times 10, and let's say you can only have 1.6 units. Typically, we round down and we would tell that person, no, you can only have one unit. And as this commenter pointed out, then perhaps developers would hold out for neighboring lots to buy those and then be able to put more units across the neighboring lots. The roundup policy is a way to promote missing middle housing types, and it would allow, based on that criteria, if it's met, it would allow those lots to go up just the additional whole unit. So that would be from 1.6 units to 2. Everywhere else in the city, and if this criteria is not met, it would still round down. So it's not a wholesale density increase. It's parcel by parcel if this criteria is met, just to get it to the next available whole unit. Evan? Oh, sorry.
No, I was sorry, my apologies. I was actually going to comment more generally on R10, but I'd wait until the rounding discussion was over. We good?
Mhm.
All right. No, I just wanted to add a little bit about, there was some discussion earlier about how the plan has changed or the ideas around the plan and the policies have changed as the public has weighed in over time throughout the process. And I was just going to point out that, the R10 is we are not increasing density as was discussed by right. And there are very limited places in the TRC being one of them. So in the transit ready corridor where you could potentially get a bonus in the R10. But that has, through our process, we actually greatly reduced the total area where R10 could in fact get a bonus. So we have very much concentrated it only on those areas where we know that there's future transit or existing transit infrastructure investment. And even then it's limited to a possible maximum increase of, I think, 50% total. So, and that's only within those corridors. So I just wanted to point that out because, we have continued to kind of chip away at where we are allowing these bonuses to get them as focused as possible in the areas that make the most sense. And R10 was definitely an area where we heard from South Tampa throughout the city that too much of the R10 had been included. And so throughout this process, we've been kind of removing parts of it to keep it very focused on places where we know that there's the infrastructure in place and the transit and support in place to serve it.
All right, we just have a quick comment for our next question that Buckhorn and Castor are against raising impact fees. So our next question is, well, it's perhaps consider linkage fees. Or
I'm not sure if we need to address that, but that is a great comment and we do appreciate that. Thank you.
Great. Okay. This is a comment or suggestion that context-sensitive neighborhoods should be shielded somewhat from the transit-ready corridors in the comp plan. While recommending increasing density along existing bus routes makes sense theoretically, the corridors should be limited from entering into the CSN. Older neighborhoods are overwhelmed with cars and the problems that come with them, speeding, parking, blocking sidewalks. And there is no relief due to the existing inadequate / not dependable public transportation. Increasing density in these areas would exacerbate the issue without dependable public transportation, further taking away the uniqueness of these historic / older neighborhoods. While rezoning is a separate issue, it is driven and guided by the comp plan.
That's a great question. Thank you. That is exactly the kind of, we're here to hear all feedback, but that's great feedback that is we're definitely going to take into consideration.
Our next question, is it possible to revert staff's language on the coastal high hazard future development versus the modified language? Can it be changed at this point?
Yes, by the direction of City Council.
Yeah, this is the draft. So City Council has the ability to direct staff to modify it further.
All right, our next is back to impact fees. Instead of looking into increasing the fees, look at a no vote from City Council for new larger development when it is to the detriment of the area / neighborhood or the density is too high, like in South Tampa.
That's a great comment. Thank you.
Next, a comment again on the fees for applications. Only $1,000, yet it costs $3,000 plus. Next comment, do not allow opportunities for increased density in coastal high hazard areas. Eliminate 7.1.4. You will only overburden City Council with unnecessary applications. Put people's safety first and foremost, not developers' pressure to overbuild in the coastal high hazard area.
Sure. I'll address, this is a great comment again. I think as many of you might know, and Melissa Dickens might have touched on earlier, 7.1.4 was added to the plan based on a motion of a planning commissioner, and a letter was then transmitted to Tampa City Council in the fall. So as a response to that motion by the planning commission, staff drafted 7.1.4 and added it to the comprehensive plan. That was not part of the motion for City Council directing us to get feedback on, but we want to hear all feedback this summer. And if this is something that folks don't think needs to be removed from the plan, we're definitely happy to discuss that further throughout the summer and also seek that direction from Tampa City Council.
Our last two comments, it looks like so far, Tampa City Council needs to change that as well as 7.1.2. And in addition to that, funny how the coastal high hazard area and South Tampa are the ones who don't want it. Put it in the University Square and Tampa Heights, etc.
Thank you. We noted your comments.
Those are our last comments in the Q&A queue.
And I know that we have some hands raised. If there are more questions, we can take those. If you would just put those in the Q&A box, then we could answer those or read them into the record.
All right, we have another question. Is the single family attached housing concept akin to the accessory dwelling unit ADU moniker popularized on the West Coast? In other words, does the R10 expanded construction planning allow for creation of secondary housing units on existing residential plots?
Good question. The plan, the comprehensive plan already enables accessory dwelling units when it's utilized for extended family residences to not count towards density. So that's a separate building form and type, and then there's more in the land development code about where ADUs should be developed and how. So any specific questions about that, I would direct to Evan Johnson. The single family attached housing concept is townhomes and duplexes. So constructed as two single family detached homes together. Usually when there's an ADU, I think the code has some criteria that about sizing, and so we wouldn't look into that would not be a consideration. We're thinking about townhomes and duplexes, or a quad with that missing middle housing style.
Don't have any additional questions queued up.
Okay, and we do have some folks I see with hands raised. We are trying to keep track of the questions in the Q&A. So if you could please put your question in the Q&A. If for some reason there's technical difficulties, we're happy to respond to questions over email as well, but we are trying to keep everything in the Q&A so that we have it all in one spot. So if you go up to the top of your screen, it's kind of the third button from the left. It says Q&A, and you should be able to type a question that then, as others have been doing, we will read aloud and respond. While we're waiting for folks, we wanted to go ahead and share some of the questions that we commonly get. We kind of touched on some of them. One of them is this rezoning my particular neighborhood? Nothing is proposed here that is a rezoning. There is an update to the land development code that is coming a little bit, we're working in coordination with city staff on the updates to the land development code, but there aren't any specific zoning changes proposed as part of this comprehensive plan update. So just want to make sure that folks have that information as well.
Yeah, and I'll touch on process a little bit. The process is a little different for adoption of a text amendment or overhaul of the section. In this case, it is reviewed by the state. So the Tampa City Council needs to take action to transmit this to the state. So again, on May 22nd, that was a transmittal hearing. Instead of transmitting, Tampa City Council said, go back out to the community, get some more feedback. That's what we're doing right now. So we're hoping on August 28th, we would come back to City Council with some changes based on what we've heard tonight, based on what we're going to hear from the rest of the outreach this summer. And then Council may choose to transmit that on August 28th. If that occurs, we would be looking at adoption in October, with the plan then being effective early next year. So that's just kind of the timeline. Again, we're going to be out in the community more. We have two meetings set up in 2 council districts already. And then I hope to have more information about the remaining 2 by the end of the week. We have an email newsletter, so please sign up for that, or you can always email us at planner@plancom.org with any more feedback and questions.
Okay, so we are hearing that there might be some technical difficulties, and that's why folks are having their hands raised. I would just encourage people to double check that the Q&A up at the top, that's what we're using, not the chat. It's the Q&A button immediately to the right of the chat, the Q&A up there. That's where we're using so that we can have all the questions written down. It looks
We
like
do have an additional question.
Okay.
Also, sorry,
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Just if your hand is raised, it may have your Q&A grayed out. So that might be a technical issue as well. Sorry, Meg, go ahead.
No, you're all right. Have the transit ready corridors been reduced or bonuses / benefits within them been reduced at all over the course of this update process? For me, increasing density around existing and future multimodal hubs and corridors is hugely important. I haven't been able to track this entire process, so I'm curious if y'all have already cut anything up to today.
The proposal in front of council has, so the transit ready corridors includes those corridors, those typically arterial roadways, as I mentioned before, as well as a certain distance buffer. And I'm going to look to Melissa Dickens to confirm this radius, because I'm blanking right now on that radius. But that is what the radius that was proposed to Tampa City Council on May 22nd and to the Planning Commission on May 12th and April 7th was what we proposed to Tampa City Council last summer. And Melissa Dickens, if you could please remind me what the mile distance radius around the transit ready corridors is.
Sure, that's an eighth of a mile.
An
So
eighth
it's
of a
a
mile.
quarter mile
Okay.
from
Thank you.
the like the fixed guideway transit, and then an eighth of a mile from the TRC. So we are hearing that people are not having the Q&A function. So maybe if we can go ahead and unmute the person who has their hand raised, and I will try to type it as best I can in the chat so that we have it. It looks like there's a couple of people that weren't able to speak. Sorry, everyone. We tested this out, but there are still some kinks. So I will go ahead and try to document as they're speaking what the question is. And I think it might be, we're hearing it could be something with the Teams version, but I will go ahead and write it down. So thanks everyone for your patience. And it looks like the first one is Carol Ann Bennett. I'm sorry, can we unmute her?
I'll do it.
Typing. Thanks.
Okay, I allowed her mic to be unmuted, but then I think Carol Ann Bennett has to unmute her own mic. But I have enabled her mic to be unmuted on my end. Carol Ann, if you can unmute yourself.
Do we want to try unmuting Deborah Zommerman first while Carol Ann might be trying to figure this out? Since we only have a few more minutes and a couple of people had issues.
Yes, Ms. Zommerman's mic has been enabled.
Yes, thank you for fixing this problem and letting us speak. With regards to the R10 and there's townhomes, if there's not an alley, I would presume each townhome would need a driveway, which would mean a lot of curb cuts, and these are on higher classified roadways. And where my concerns come into play is, number one, if you're in a neighborhood with bike paths and you've got a whole bunch of additional curb cuts, there's a huge safety issue with the bike lanes. And I was wondering if there had been any thought put into that. I think basically townhomes next to an active bike lane could create a dangerous situation. The other thing that I also have as a concern for all these potentially new driveways is the fact that, particularly if you're in a coastal high hazard area, that's going to be less impervious surface between the street and actually the sidewalk or the property line. And in neighborhoods that experience flooding, that will just continue to contribute to the flooding. So have either of those items been considered with regards to the areas that may not be appropriate for an R10? And thank you for taking the question verbally.
Sure. I will let Lauren O'Neill answer about the pervious surface, but I will just chime in that the comprehensive plan encourages utilization of the alleys for those, I think the policy says specifically for those to be preserved in form and function. So as these come in through the process, if there is an alley that can be utilized, we would be looking for that to be utilized, but it's not a requirement. However, that's really good feedback that we can take into consideration.
Thank you. And a lot of neighborhoods just don't have alleys, so that could be in this area for consideration. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so, well, to add on a little bit about the driveways, that is something that would be good for us to consider as part of our land development code update. Because there are ways for homes without alleys to even create like a side alley, like their garage doesn't need to be in the front. It could be in the back, but ultimately that would not address the curb cut, more just the visual aspect of the garage on the front. So sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent. But to answer your question about the pervious surface, the city of Tampa does currently have regulations regulating our single family and duplex homes. They cannot exceed more than 40% not impervious coverage of their lot. When they exceed that 40% coverage, they have to mitigate it in some way. That could be a swale, a small retention area, and sometimes some developers will even do underground like stormwater collection in more sophisticated instances. So to answer your question is, for that, we actually are on the cutting edge of that. In our coastal area action plan, we did not find any other municipality in the state of Florida that regulated single family homes and their coverage of their lot. So the city of Tampa is definitely already thinking about that and looking at ways to continue addressing that.
I would just add as an aside from the city, our stormwater department, we're in the process of updating and creating a citywide watershed by watershed stormwater plan, and that will include capital improvements that the city would have to program and make in order to improve stormwater conditions. But it also would likely include changes to the technical standards, which affect private development. So that is a process that is underway, and that is something that, they are modeling every watershed and ultimately are going to come up with very specific recommendations depending on where you are and what the issues are in your area. But that is something that will also help potentially address some of those issues. But to Lauren's point, we do have very stringent standards for single family when compared to most other jurisdictions, particularly in the region as well.
I'll go ahead and grab looks like our final question from the Q&A. I heard that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Carol Ann, we're going to try to get you unmuted. I'm not sure what's been happening, but we did enable your unmuting, but we'll try again after Meg reads this question. And then we have a question from Jamie Jones. I'm sorry, Meg. I didn't mean to interrupt,
you're
Carol Ann.
right.
I just want to let you know we're trying to get it fixed.
This question says, I heard that the TRC boundaries were already in the existing flu in some way, but that this update makes them more implementable. Is that the case? Where are they in the existing flu map or the policy?
Yeah, they're the in the existing future land use, it's transit emphasis corridors, and there's no boundary. It's really just a listing of the corridors, and they were envisioned as areas that we would expect transit to occur, and there's some design criteria in the plan now about putting buildings up to the road, parking in the rear, and a lot of that has been carried forward for design along transit ready corridors. But yeah, the plan has and there's no bonus associated in the plan today with transit emphasis corridors. So there's some differences, some nuances there in how that's been updated.
Okay, I'm gonna try. it says, Carol Ann, that you are not muted. You should be able to unmute. But if you can't for some reason, if you want to email us your question and we can include it as part of the record for this meeting. Unfortunately, it's saying I can either disable your mic, but there's no ability for me to unmute you further. You would need to unmute. So if you want to send us an email with your question, we can make sure that it's part of this record. And Debbie, I did put your question summarized in the chat, so we have that. But why don't we go ahead then and see if we can hear from Jamie Jones, and then I think that'll probably be our last question. We do want to be respectful of everyone's time. So let's go
I've
ahead and
allowed
see.
Jamie Jones to unmute themselves.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, y'all. Appreciate the opportunity. I know, well, a little background to this. So I know that we have this multi-nuclei, development approach between downtown, West Shore, New Tampa, keep going, right? And you guys have brought up the idea of kind of neighborhood activity centers. Can you expand on those and tell us what the criteria for requesting one for your neighborhood or something like that is? And is there, more time for that within this update?
Yeah, Melissa Dickens, did you want to chime in on that one, or should I?
I was just trying to type it out. Do you mind?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So individual neighborhood meetings through the summer is the question. Yes, if you email me, if your neighborhood association would like us to come this summer and speak to your neighborhood association about this update, we're happy to. Just coordinate with us. We are on a tight timeline, so the sooner the better, because we want to make sure we have enough staff to attend these, as well as the district-specific meetings that were requested by council. And my email is in the Q&A function. It should be posted, malonej@plancom.org.
Awesome. Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course.
We have one more in the chat. This might be, running up in time, but permeable concrete blocks for driveways are popular in the rainy United Kingdom. Some with small patches of grass grown within the center of hollow driveway bricks being a popular option. Worth study for residential flood mitigation to extend duplexes, create additional driveways.
Thank you for your comment. We will add that to the record. We appreciate it.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. We did have one comment that says that CB shows muted on my end. It does for us too. We can't physically change that, unfortunately. So if if Carol Ann's not able to unmute herself, we would ask that she please send us a written comment, and we might try tomorrow with joining again or joining back in, but we do apologize that there was a technical issue. It hopefully will be something that we can figure out between now and tomorrow. With that, I think that concludes our meeting at 7:30. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. Really want to underscore and thank you all for joining us again. We will make sure that everyone that is registered for this meeting is added to our email list so that you find out when we have our upcoming neighborhood meetings, when all of those get scheduled, the district specific meetings, when those get scheduled. And we really appreciate all of your comments, your time, and your feedback this evening. So with that, just want to say thanks and have a great evening.